And let me see, Salim is in Preston and Richard is in Watford. Good morning, Richard.
Morning.
Oliver's still with us, by the way. Oliver Kamm.
Oh, is he? Yeah. Oh, tremendous. Listen to more of his moral high ground pedestal talking down to people.
Well, listen,
at the end of the day...
Oh, whoa, you're on full effect here, Richard.
He's incensed because we've got to, in the West, the question we should have asked after 9/11 was not who, but was why. And we've got to start talking to people and understanding that if you invade a country, if you walk into a country, the people that live in that country don't want you there.
Do you want to speak to an Iraqi? Do you want to speak to an Iraqi? Do you want to speak to...
No, yeah, I do. I'd love to. But 90% of suicide bombers come from countries that we are in. Now, we've got to ask that question. Why do people feel so incensed? Why do the Palestinians feel so incensed against the Israelis when we have a double standard in the West when we deal with Israel and the way that they are treating it? They're still building it in the territories when they're not supposed to, and Obama's asked them not to. They've said, no, well, we're going to carry on building. And if you're in an Arab country and you're looking at this happening, you're saying, hang on a minute, you're hitting us because we had a leader that did this, that and the other, but Israel can completely ignore you.
Let's go to this Iraqi. I want you to hear him. Hassan in Manchester, how do you feel about it?
I'm probably more British than I am Iraqi, but I do have Iraqi ancestry. Yeah, I mean, I have to thank Blair, firstly, for actually getting rid of Saddam. But I would say that unfortunately they didn't plan and they didn't do what was necessary to stop what happened to Iraq following, which was the destruction of Iraq, essentially. I mean, from an Iraqi perspective, there's no way to get rid of Saddam unless someone intervened, unless foreign intervention happened. So for us, there was no other way, and we have to remember from our perspective, there is nobody in history, in fact, we don't believe there's anyone in history who has done to his people what Saddam has done to his people. And it was to the point that two brothers would be too scared to speak about politics in their own house, and they'd be scared that their own brother would go and tell, the Ba'athist guy down the road what happened, what their conversation was, and that would result in their death and the death of their family. So from our perspective, we have got rid of the worst dictator, and we have some freedom, and we have the ability to progress. At the moment, things are very bad, but they are getting better. So hopefully, in the long run, this will be something that was worth doing. And people who do say that, many people died, it's true, and it's very, very sad. But the reality is that had Saddam stayed, he would have killed more people in the long run.
Salim, isn't that the case? We'll bring Oliver in a second.
I'm sure it possibly is. But the point here is there's a couple of points. Number one, when Oliver said about United Nations, it was in breach of United Nations Security Council resolutions, and Israel hasn't breached a single one. The fact of the matter is that it never gets to the Security Council because America always vetoes any resolutions that go against Israel. But my point is that Hans Blix was appointed by the Security Council to go and look at the nuclear sites and his nuclear capabilities and his weapons of mass destruction, which, by the way, was supplied by the West in the first place. But the point
wait. Let's nail that. Oliver Kamm, is that the case? People always say this, that weapons of mass destruction were supplied by the West. Is that right?
No, that's nonsense. May I deal briefly with the comment from Hassan in Manchester, which I think is a very impressive and perceptive observation in both its parts. First, the utter depraved brutality of Saddam Hussein and his psychopathic sons, and second, the unquestionable point that post-war planning was exceptionally poor, and it was poor in particular because it understated the barbarism of the Ba'athist theocratic alliance that did appalling things to Iraqi civil society. Let me then turn to the previous gentleman's point, is it Salim, who remarked with, if I may say so without being offensive, astonishing ignorance that 90% of suicide bombers come from countries which we are occupied. Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
It was Richard in Watford.
I beg your pardon for having confused you. One commenter did. That's a remarkably ignorant thing to say. Most suicide attacks have been recorded in Sri Lanka, which has nothing whatsoever to do with US and UK policy, and it is flagrantly absurd to suggest that the attackers of 9/11 were motivated by concern at occupation of their countries. In fact, the country that they came from was Saudi Arabia, and they were motivated by extreme fanatical ideology bent on the destruction not of injustices that we have perpetrated, but of the good things in our society: women's rights, pluralism, democracy, separation of civic and religious authority. It was an attack on liberal values in their broadest sense, which we responded to. We did not provoke.
Nicky, can I just come in? Salim, let me finish my point. The point is, Hans Blix clearly said, give me more time. And he was a representative from the United Nations Security Council to go and look at the weapons of mass destruction, okay? And we sidelined him, told him to get out because we were going to invade Iraq anyway. That's a fact. And the second fact is, because of our invasion of Iraq, we have created the absolute dream of a terrorist organization to allow more terrorists to be recruited, where we should have paid concentration on the initial invasion of Afghanistan. And that's why we're facing all these situations in Afghanistan at the moment, because we took our eye off the ball and what we were supposed to go in there for, which was linked with 9/11. And we've now gone into Iraq, which has nothing to do with 9/11, and actually created a worse terrorist threat. And that's a fact.
Oliver, this 9/11 thing's a red herring, isn't it?
To the invasion of Iraq? No, it isn't. There was no link between the terrorists of 9/11 and Iraq, but there was a link between Iraq and the terrorism of 9/11 in this respect.
Rubbish. Oliver, Al-Qaeda hated Iraq just as much as we hate Al-Qaeda. That's a fact. Saddam Hussein never, ever had any sympathy for Al-Qaeda or vice versa.
Yeah, you must get rid of this linguistic tick of "that's a fact." You've said it about 5 or 6 times, and if you're going to use that sort of phrase, you ought to research your facts before doing so. There was a link between terrorism and Saddam Hussein's regime, in the sense that there was, in this slum state, this slum region of autocratic states in the Middle East, the Middle East is not a slum, but the autocratic states were a slum. There was, in this terrible political environment, only one avenue for political dissent, and that was the mosque. Fanatical, Islamist, terrorist totalitarianism. In order to undercut the conditions for the growth of terrorism, Tony Blair saw as long ago as the 1990s that a spread of liberal democratic values was the way to undercut support for it. That was why Saddam Hussein, and the campaign to overthrow Saddam Hussein, was part of an anti-terrorist strategy to ensure that autocratic states that are breeding grounds for terrorism could no longer fester in that way.
Can I come back there, please?
Yeah.
While Oliver had some points before, I have to say that the picture that he's painting is not one that is true at all. Saddam actually, during his whole time, oppressed people who were religious, whether they were, visiting the mosques, whether they were going to places of holy places. He really oppressed religion and didn't allow people to practice their religion in freedom. So this link between Saddam and religious fanaticism didn't exist. But Ba'athists are actually very anti-religion. They have nothing to do with religion, and you can see what's happening with Iraq now, that no religion really allows. Even if they claim to be religious fanatics, they wouldn't go and kill hundreds of Muslims, let's say, for example. Ba'athists have no link to religion at all. And while I do agree that it was good that we got rid of Saddam, the reason that the West went into Iraq are not as, I don't believe anyway, that they are as Oliver has stated. There are interests for the West in Iraq, strategic, wealth-wise, politically. There are many reasons for the West to be in Iraq. We have benefited from this in the sense that we have got rid of a dictator, but we still disagree with a lot of what the West are doing there, and a lot with what the Americans are trying to do there.
Okay.
So,
we must leave it there. The inquiry is starting in a minute. We will.